welcome back to another episode of the Catholic Buzz podcast. Thanks for joining us today as we continue all the conversation about things Catholic that pertain to us and you and everyone around us, I guess.
Apparently, yeah.
My name is Father Daniele, and I'm joined, as usual, by Josh Sullivan.
Hello.
Josh, welcome.
Thank you.
And Matt Van Milligan.
Hello.
Matt is the better-looking one of the bunch here.
Apparently, yeah. That was,
We get all sorts of fan mail about Matt. He's taken, ladies.
they just talk about the one with hair. That's all we know. So that's
So guess what? In October, actually, if I'm going to be very precise, on the feast of St. Michael the Archangel, September 29th, there was a new study released by the Benedict XVI Institute in Canada. It's a research report written and compiled by Dr. Ryan Topping, and it's called Meet Our New Priests. So it's a study that presents 12 key findings about the background, discernment, and seminary formation of Canada's recent ordination classes, like recent priests, those who have become priests.
That's cool.
Very cool. It's very unique for a Canadian study.
yeah. We don't normally we always get tied in with the United States. You know what I mean? And so this is kind of cool. That's specifically Canadian.
It's true. And Dr. Ryan Topping, brilliant man, and he actually presented this to us at a vocations conference at the end of September. But it talks about where these vocations are coming from, what kind of things these seminarians were involved with before they went to the seminary, who helped them in their discernment, which is really interesting to see.
Cool.
What kind of spiritual practices they were involved with before they entered the seminary, and what they were helping with in the parish, like what ministry they were doing.
Yeah.
So lots of beautiful things here from this study, and so we're kind of going to go through it today, and then we're going to talk about the overall picture, because that's the question a lot of people have, like, why do we have a priest shortage? People are always in fear that churches are going to close, that we don't have enough priests, all that different things. So we'll look at the numbers here in Canada, we'll look at the numbers globally, and then we'll kind of Go from there and see what comes. Okay, so I'm not going to read the whole report. It's but a couple things that I found interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So number one, the question was, who encouraged you most to consider the priesthood? Okay, and 78% of the recently ordained in Canada said their parish priest.
Wow.
78%, which is a beautiful thing. I'm glad that priests are encouraging others, right? But here may have been surprising to me a little bit. Mother and father were a close second at 74%.
Wow. See, a lot of times you hear about like mothers and fathers are sometimes a discouragement when it comes to the priesthood. Like, well, I want grandkids, you can't do that, or whatever the case may be. So it's good to know those numbers. It's kind of cool. And like that's something that I think as parents, especially for me, I'm a parent of 4 boys. Like it's something that we talk about, and that it's like, yeah, you could do it. My joke is always that you can't. 3 of you can go be priests, but at least one of you can't, and I'll choose the biggest, most handsome one to continue the breeding stock and carry the family name. But the idea there that the parents are, it kind of makes sense to me though, because it kind of shows them that. I would suggest if parents and the priests are the ones that are encouraging the most, well, priests make sense, where the people are finding their faith through their priest or in their priest and emulating that or reflecting that, but also in their parents.
Yeah, at home.
Makes sense. So the people that are turning to the priesthood. So I would suggest that makes probably some priests deeper in their faith maybe than from previous years or whatever the case may be. I mean, depending on what the numbers show from previous years. But
that's right.
You know what I mean? Like that these parents have raised their kids right.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and just from a kind of data and statistics perspective, like we're actually only given the success factor here.
Yes.
So it's like for the ones who did become priests, parents played a major role in encouraging them to do so. So, you hear those stories about like, yeah, I want grandbabies or like whatever. Like how many other otherwise, would be great priests are deterred by their parents, or that like what would the numbers look like?
Right. If
If
that
so,
wasn't
like
the
we
case.
don't have the kind of the
flip
opposite data
data.
of
Yeah, that's very true. Another thing I want to mention here is at 65%, it says parishioner, like a parishioner in the parish, which is really a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Like parishioners encouraging young men to consider the priesthood is a beautiful thing. So if that's happening in your parish at home, if you're listening, and maybe if it's not happening, you could be the one to tap a young man on the shoulder, and maybe it's hard for young men to go to church by themselves. Everyone just thinks they're going to be a priest.
Although always look for the finger. I had a woman come up and told me that God told her that I was supposed to be a priest, and then I had to point to my ring finger and be like, well, my wife and 2 kids at the time, like my wife and 2 kids are going to be upset to hear that, But it is important to kind of keep that,
She took a stab in the dark.
She took a stab in the dark. She didn't look at my hand. That's what, I had the ring finger on.
Also notable on that question, on the low end,
Yeah.
it was surprisingly bishop at 26%.
It doesn't surprise me as much, only because I don't know like how much would the bishop have in contact with the regular folk, right?
True.
That would be, you know what I mean?
And school chaplain was the lowest, 13%.
Oh, that's unfortunate. That's
That's
disappointing.
very unfortunate. Okay, so that was that question. Another thing that I really, really enjoyed reading was which parish ministries did you serve in before entering the seminary? And the top 2 highest were altar serving at 70%. And that statistic is also the same in the United States.
Okay.
Yeah. And number 2 was lector at 61%.
Again, that makes perfect sense to me in the sense that if you're an altar server or a lector, you're probably attending mass on a regular basis.
Exactly.
And your parents are encouraging you to get involved.
Exactly.
So this makes sense.
That's very true. And then there's stats on if they were involved in a parish youth group. 35% said they were.
Yeah.
They attended World Youth Days or Catholic youth conferences like the ones we throw here in town. Okay, so did you participate in any of these prayer practices before entering the seminary? Number 1 at 83% were regular confession.
Wow.
Regular
Okay, that's
confession.
great.
And 78% said Eucharistic adoration.
It's funny. I had a priest one time tell me and tell a group of young students, adoration, confession, the rosary, they're all old traditions. They're all out. And my thought at the time was like, well, you just don't know. And obviously because of our faith. But this obviously proves the opposite, right? Is confession, adoration.
Those are the top 3.
And then that's funny that you said the rosary because the rosary was tied with adoration at 78%.
Oh, was it? Yeah, that makes sense to me.
So
Yeah.
confession, adoration, and the rosary were the 3 highest prayer practices that people had before entering the seminary.
So those are what is that age group for priests? I mean, not age, but what is that? What are we looking at for priests?
For the study,
Yeah.
they were priests that were interviewed, new ordinations to the priesthood in Canada in the year 2021 and 2022.
Wow, so it's like brand new.
It's a brand new
Yeah,
report. in
2 years,
Canada.
brand new. Wow,
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. That's awesome.
So it talks about a lot of different things here, but okay. So those are some of the stats. One that we were kind of talking about, Matt, before we went on the air was the replacement ratio.
Yeah.
So apparently, the Vatican Central Office of Church Statistics has established a replacement ratio for seminarians to priests. Okay. So a ratio, it's our it's a replacement ratio for seminarians to priests, RRSP.
All right, works for Canada.
Works for Canada. Yeah,
A retirement fund.
Yeah.
Based
Investing
upon-
in our future.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Based upon its own analysis, the Vatican has proposed the RRSP in Canada, or the RSP, to be 12.5 seminarians for every 100 active priests. Okay.
Say it again.
12.5 seminarians for every 100 active priests.
Okay.
So a country would need to maintain a seminarian population that is 12.5% of its priestly population.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So how does this apply to Canada? Well, as of this study, there were 6,025 priests in Canada.
Yeah.
So multiply by 12.5% is 753 seminarians. So we need 753 men
replenish.
in the seminary to have a good RRSP, according to the Vatican Statistics. Okay. And currently in Canada, we have a total of, I just lost the number. We have a total of 211.
Ooh.
Yeah.
211.
That's like a third of what we need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we need 753 seminarians. We have 211. Okay, so that means we're not really matching the RRSP according to the Vatican studies, right? Now, that's the report that came out of Canada. Again, it's the Benedict XVI Institute. If people want to read it, Dr. Ryan Topping is the author of that study. And the Vatican just recently actually posted some worldwide statistics. Okay, so this was just released in October, so not too long ago, and it's comparing numbers from the end of 2021 to the previous year, 2020. Okay, so the number of Catholics increased in the world by 16 million. Wow. Okay, as compared to 2020. The global percentage of Catholics, though, decreased slightly to 17.6% of the population, right? Then the number of bishops decreased. There's 5,340 in the world, okay? And the total number of priests decreased by 2,300. Guess how many priests in the world, if you had to guess?
Oh, I don't know. 100,000?
Oh, what do you think?
I millions.
Millions?
Millions?
407,000
Whoa.
priests
That surprises me. Yeah.
in the world.
So almost
Yeah.
500,000.
Okay, interesting that the number of permanent deacons continues to rise all over the world.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And with the number of priests, the number of Catholics increasing, the number of priests decreasing, there's an average of 3,370 Catholics for every priest in the world.
Say it again. 300?
3,000.
3,000.
Yeah.
373
That's
Catholics
why
for
I
every
was
priest
surprised.
in the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
Okay, so those are a lot of statistics for people to. So what do these all mean?
Let's put that into perspective just right here. So when we have, because we have a lot of little towns around Northern Ontario where we're here in North Bay. So we have like North Bay's population of 55,000, 56,000, somewhere around there. But I'm going to say 17% of those are Catholic or whatever the case may be. But when you look at some of the other places like Trout Creek or Powassan, or like look at the numbers in those little small towns and those, or we have, Astorville and Corbeil in the area, and we have some churches that are closing in those areas. But it kind of makes sense if we have 3,000 people per priest, and we have one or two of these congregations that have 10 people at them, or even 25 people in them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's why what's normal now is for a priest not to have just one
parish,
church,
but to have like 3 or 4,
or a couple.
yeah.
Right?
I mean, it makes sense to have missionary priests too. I mean missionary parishes and that kind of thing. I think we're going to see that more. But I'm just saying, it makes sense to me why, if you need 3,000 parishioners per one, it kind of makes sense to me. And you're going to have more than that. Like if you have a parish of 10,000, you have 2 priests at it. You know what I mean? That's covering more than their fair share. But.
So this conversation about the decrease or the shortage of priests has been going on for a long time.
Yeah, for sure.
Like I know as long as I've been practicing in the church, the priests have always talked about it. I know when I was a teenager, our parish was clustered with 2 other churches, so there were 3 churches with 1 priest, and that was like 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. So so there's been like a decline in the number of priests. However, we also have to put that in perspective.
Yeah.
Right. Like, let's think about when all these churches were built.
Yeah.
These churches were built mostly in the boom era, right? So before the war, people were immigrating to Canada. You had the Italians sort of building their churches. You had like different ethnic groups building their churches. After the war, you saw more churches go up. And remember, at the time, people didn't drive as much as we do today.
You're right. Good call.
So there was a kind of a church in every neighborhood that you walked to, and that was your parish. That was because you lived in this neighborhood, that was your parish. Well, then all sorts of things kind of contribute to the decline, right?
Yeah.
So we see a sharp decline in the number of Catholics attending Mass, right? So that the stat I read today was from 1960, I believe. There was like 52.7 Catholics were attending Mass regularly as compared to like 17% today, right? So that's a sharp decline. We also have a decline in sort of society. The number of births are down.
Actually gone down,
right?
For sure. And that's why our immigrant population now, it's all over the news in Canada. I don't know about other places, but immigration has gone way, way, way up. But it's because we can't sustain the population with the birth rate that we're at right now.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
And in some areas where, depending where people are immigrating from, you see an increase in Catholicism in little patches of Ontario
exactly.
and Canada, because you might have people come
From different
more
countries,
religious countries,
Yeah.
right? So you're seeing sort of diverse parish communities happening in Canada. So I want people to have the bigger picture, because then people started the neighborhood church is something of the past, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
I agree.
Like people are now driving to places. People are looking for more choice.
Well, technology has made it able. Like, so I can be honest. I drive. Like, I live 25 minutes away from my parish, which means I drive past potentially 3 other parishes to get to the parish that I belong to. And part of that is because of, like, I look for making sure that my family can grow and I can grow. We've talked about this with church hopping and all that kind of stuff. But this is also, like, that's the area, that community that I belong to now. We have roles and responsibilities that we belong to, and so it makes sense that that's the one that we go to.
Yeah.
But there are churches that are closer. Definitely, you know what I mean? And it's not that we never go. Like, my wife, when she's working night shift, she'll go to the other church on a Saturday night or something like that. But this is the church that we belong to, and there's reasons for it. Sometimes it's because like my kids belong to a youth group, or that they help out with altar serving, or I'm part of the choir, or whatever. There's other reasons there too. And these other communities might not have that. You know what I mean? Or those areas.
It's true. I think, like, if you think about too, in the last 20 years, maybe 30 years, there's been a number of churches that have closed, probably in every diocese in Canada, right, and perhaps the United States. I don't know, but so churches are closing. People get upset. People get upset when their church closes. Right, that's their parish. That's where they were baptized, were married, whatever. And my home parish closed when I was involved very much in my home parish growing up, and it closed back in 2002. So that's pretty early for when we're talking about church closures. Yeah. But people kind of hold on. I know a number of people who, even in our own city, when their church closed, they just haven't been back to church. Yeah. That was it. Like, our parish closes, that's it. Same from when my parish closed. Some people are just like, I've had enough, I'm not going, because they closed my church. So all of these factors, why I'm saying contribute. If there's less people in our pews, there's obviously going to be less priests.
But I think that goes to show too that maybe we didn't do a great job at educating these people why church is important. You know what I mean? Because, like, for me, I don't go to church because of the community necessarily. I mean, I do, but I don't. Like, if let's say my church was to close, I would get to the next church because it's going to the daily Eucharist. I mean, going to Eucharist, you know what I mean? Like, going to the sacraments because I need them, not because the community needs them, not because, so being educated in that too. I think what happened was we had kind of what you suggested. Churches opened up because of cultural. So, like, we had a lot of Italians move in. We had Polish. We had
population.
Irish, and
like, some neighborhoods were just like
booming,
bursting at the seams.
And we had a lot of that, especially in the outlying towns of the bigger cities, right? Because you had, like, communities like in Northern Ontario, it's lumber industry and those types of mining industry and stuff. And so all of a sudden these things are booming, and then all of a sudden now they're not. Right. And it's shrunk down from a 10,000 person town down to 300. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so now what do we do with that? Do we close that church? Well, there's still 10 people going to that church. We still, so.
Yeah. And what I find interesting about this discussion is that, like, you can do that factor analysis, or you can, like, you can look at, like, because, like, yes, you can identify, like, a general decline in church attendance or something, but, like, some parishes are growing. Some parishes are doing really well, despite those other factors. Agreed. But it's, and what I appreciate about this study is that, like, when you're looking at kind of demographics, if you're looking at statistics, you're like, we have, like, a case study conducted over about 50 years in Quebec, where you kind of see a much sharper decline in attendance than we're seeing in Ontario and much of the rest of Canada. But you can do a bit of that factor analysis, or we have that kind of data to be like, okay, what happened here? Is like, well, yes, it was more of a cultural thing that is like, the
cultural faith.
And it would, like, that weren't necessarily properly evangelized. But we can also look at that as kind of a cautionary tale, and again, look at some of these statistics, or look at, okay, so this is the recipe book for,
how do we make good
young
priests?
Engaged priests?
Yeah, exactly.
But what can we do? But it also, like, takes into account, like, time considerations. Okay, so their average formation, I think, from the study is 8 years. At a cost of, I think, close to $300,000. So just, like, from like any other perspective, or like any other like if you're looking at corporate recruitment, if you like a 5-year or a 10-year plan, like how do we manage our talent pipeline to get like the people in place to actually be doing the things that so looking at that replacement rate of like 3.5 or 3.7 times the number of seminarians that we currently have,
What's that cost? Yeah.
And what do we do now? Like, what can you and I do as, fathers of boys or, just members of a parish community? How can we encourage this in a way that actually takes that timeline into account? It's like, okay, so the decisions we're making right now may have be impactful in 2030 or 2035 when if we're taking these other cautionary tales or these other kind of historical examples, when they're going to be needed, we're not talking about, we can't just kind of ramp up recruitment and have results in 6 months. We need to think about this kind of strategically and play the long game.
I want to mention something that I think it was Father Mike Schmidtz who had said it, but he said that in large part priests are the only ones that have recognized the priest shortage. And he said that for a large part, the laity have not really recognized the priest shortage. And here was his point, because some people might say, well, what do you mean? His point was that in large part, the quote unquote service that people receive from their parish has not changed.
No, he's still
in the last, let's say, 20 years, 30 years. They still have their Sunday Mass time.
You have daily Mass for the most part.
Mass. They have daily Mass, confession times. They can meet with a priest when they want. All
Weddings,
those sort of
funerals,
things.
baptisms.
Right. So the service that they receive from the parish maybe has not changed drastically, but in the same time frame, like let's say 20, 30 years, the number of priests has sharply reduced.
Yeah.
So priests recognize the shortage more so than anyone else because now they're doing the job of what used to be 2, 3, sometimes 4 priests, right? We were counting the other day how many priests roles that I have, right? Like it's that I think priests have recognized that because they're serving the same amount of people that a large group of priests would have served
on a regular basis. Yeah. I think, and it's also part of the reason I'm going to say of the decline in Catholics is because what we fell into a custom of having a lot more priests, let's say, and so then all of a sudden ministries that should be lay ministries, that the diaconates, like the deacons should lead, and those types of things, like ministries like going to visit the sick, or visiting the dying, or visiting those in prison, visiting like all those types of ministries, educating the young people, all that kind of stuff. Kind of fell to cultural Catholically, fell to the priest's shoulders, but we had, let's say, three parish priests, 3 priests in a parish, and one of them would just take on youth ministry. So they'd be going in and visiting the schools and doing all that stuff. But then other people didn't necessarily have to do that job, or we didn't have the people step up because of the cultural decline of Catholicism kind of slowly. So we lose that. And so what would happen then is, but as we've declined in our priests, so has the opportunity for like, how much time can you possibly spend full-time at a hospital, full-time at a school, full-time in the ministry of sick and the old age homes, at the same time doing the administration job of a parish and all that stuff. So our laity has kind of fallen behind and not stepped up to fill the gap of cultural Catholics, but also the shortage of priests, right? And
exactly.
And so we have to encourage our laity to kind of start stepping up there and start doing that job,
Yeah, and you see that with the decline of people attending church, right? They're less likely to help out in the parish, right? Because there's not the population there to help out.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. Like one of the things about the shortage of priests that's unfortunate is that the priest is often doing things that he shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because there's less priests going around, so he really should be focused on sacramental ministry.
I was going to say that's
right?
like the thing that a priest can do that nobody else can do.
Yeah.
Is the sacramental ministry.
Exactly. He should be like
that's where his focus should be. Whereas in going to visit the sick, the priest last rites. I mean, like blessings and those.
There's
kind of
nothing
things.
wrong with the priest going to visit the sick, of course.
But it shouldn't be the sole focus of a ministry.
That's
it should
right.
be people's ministry. But that's also where people like. I think the decline of people is because they started to view the church as a weekly entertainment. I got to go for 1 hour of mass and I be entertained at mass. Not that it's entertaining, but you know what I'm saying? Like you go, you sit there, you do your job, and then you come out and you're done. And it was more culturally Catholic, again, not understanding the theology behind it or the reasoning why we go to mass. People started to decline because they're also not neither. They're not being asked either. I mean, we did a job, not asking people necessarily to come and join us. But then we're not exploiting is the wrong word, but we're not asking them to use their gifts. So if they have a gift and talent of music, recognizing that gift and putting them into the choir and the music, using their musical gifts. If they have a gift of greeting and outgoing, and maybe that's the one that we send to the people in long-term care homes or the sick that are shut-ins and need the Eucharist. Like the Eucharist ministry can do that, but at the same time make them feel loved and part of the community and welcomed. Like pointing those people out, asking them to use gifts, because if people are using their gifts, then they're going to feel life from those gifts, and then they're going to want to be part of the parish too, right?
Yeah, like I always see a parish community as like as a big family, just like in your family. Everyone has to pull their weight.
Yeah.
Right. Like everyone has to do something to contribute to the life of the family. So in the same thing in the parish, lots of things happen when lots of people contribute.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like the parish is a large family, and that's what you see in sort of larger communities where you see growth is where people are out there. People are out there doing stuff representing the community, and we've largely lost that. We've largely lost people in the schools, in the prisons, in the hospitals, all these places where we can bring Christ to others, because the priest just can't be in 15 places in one day.
When I heard that we taught, like at one time, priests were teaching catechetically, right, and teaching how and that, I mean, a big part of their job, which is great. But then we're now getting into the apostolic age, where basically evangelization, where our focus is not now about taking care of our flock, it's about going out and getting new flock and doing that. Our priests, though, like I'm going to encourage the priests that you see, the healthier parishes are priests that are going out and asking people to be involved. I need you to come and help. And so if there are priests standing there and their church is dying and they're listening to the show right now and they're going like, okay, well, what's one going? I'm going to encourage, take it to prayer, but start asking. First of all, start praying about it so that God can give you the Holy Spirit can give you the little, ask this person about it. You know what I mean? But then go out and ask those individuals to help you run this ministry so that you can, I mean, you can have a hand in it to start it off, but then slowly back away and let them run the ministry. You're always going to be, it's always going to be a branch or an arm of your ministry. It's always going to be, like, we talk about youth ministry a lot because I'm involved with youth ministry, but youth ministry, when we're doing confirmation prep or marriage prep and those things, we're a branch off of the priest's ministry, meaning the priest should have full say when it comes to confirmation or confession prep and all that stuff. But we are doing it for not in place of the priest, but the priest should be involved, but they're the ones in charge of making the decisions.
Yeah, to
but
keep
we
in
can
mind the vision of the parish, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is, with so many people's gifts and talents, you look at like just our church buildings, like, and so much of the priest time is taken up like administering the building, right? Like, the furnace breaks, this, that.
You're the one that has
whatever.
to call around and
It's
find
but,
why? Yeah.
I'm blessed with a good team of people around me that kind of take care of those things, right? But in parishes, like that's where the priest spends a lot of his time, and it's unfair to the priest, right? Because and not only unfair, but there are better suited people in the parish community. Like there are people with
the gift of administration, like that could actually, like, maybe your job is not administration, and so why are you the one doing it? Well, no, pray about it and then go find the person. The other thing that I'm going to say that is part of it, and that this is part of our culture that we kind of got to bring back, though, because I've found this when we ask for volunteers nowadays, it's really hard to have anybody put up their hand. People don't put up their hand anymore. If I say, okay, I need 10 people, I mean, even the Knights of Columbus, or even with the youth when we're dealing with them, like, I need 10 guys to come do this for me. Nobody puts up their hand. But if I go ask them individually, they'll come out and support and they'll come out and help. But it takes so if you're standing there going, hey, please raise your hand if this is, like, no one's going to raise their hand. You have to go out and ask individually and say, like, I need you. And then and then people will step up. Realizing that you don't have to pay necessarily people to do all the jobs that, and that's one of the things, like, you need someone to plow the driveway. You need someone to, like, these are things that people would be willing to do if they have that, like, Bob's got a plow on his truck and he can do that. I mean, depending on insurance and everything else, I guess. But like he can just plow the driveway for the rectory if you want. You know, like that's something he can do. And Bob's not really a member of the parish community, but his wife is. You know what I mean? Like, but Bob doesn't mind because he's doing it for the church and he feels like he's doing a good job. You know what I mean? Those are places, but you got to pray and you got to ask those right people.
Yeah, and so what? One of the other things that I think is a deterrent, like that's why I was surprised by the statistic here that moms and dads are encouraging priests, like right from the family. Sometimes I hear that a lot as vocation director, talking with young people who are discerning the priesthood, that their parents are discouraging them from even entertaining the thought of being a priest. But what are their reasons for doing that? Well, there's a whole bunch of things. You know, people say that priests aren't happy, priests are lonely, celibacy is not, shouldn't be expected anymore. Like all these things that come, like the typical questions that come, you know, should we let priests get married? Should we let ordain women to be priests? Like all those questions that come. And I to address that, we've addressed these topics on other episodes, but I have seen great growth with young people when we are faithful to the teachings of the Catholic Church.
Very much so.
When we're faithful to the teachings of the Catholic Church, when we're forming people as disciples of Jesus, you see them come alive and you see them want to be open at least to discerning the priesthood. I think what I always believe, what we do matters. Like what a priest does matters, but what the laity does also matters. So, for example, a priest, if he's rushing through Mass just to get everyone out because they like a short Mass, well, we're not really instilling in people the reason why we're at Mass. If we're just making sort of a mockery of things, joking or not taking seriously homilies or the liturgy or whatever, why would anyone else take it seriously? Yeah. If we're rushing through the consecration, how do people come to believe in what the Eucharist is? You know, sometimes I visit some churches and I'm just like, it's hard when it's like, how do people believe that is Jesus from the way we treat the sacrament, right? But when someone takes their time, when someone is purposefully trying to lead others to see the beauty in the liturgy, to see the beauty in the church's teachings, to see the beauty in the church itself, young people come alive with that. You know, we're going to talk about a lot of that next week on our episode where we're going to talk about young people and the tradition of the church. But I think it starts with the priest because if the priest sets the tone for his parish, then everyone else becomes witnesses to the faith. And we have to be real witnesses. Like we can't just, what are we witnessing to if we're not being truthful or living our faith with integrity? You know what I mean? So I think that goes a long way. All these other things, lonely, happy, celibacy, those are all like...
Okay, what I'm going to suggest is ask anybody, like take a survey and see if it's higher in priest versus married life or in... Even, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think you're going to find much of a difference of anything.
And what oftentimes what a lot of people are proposing as the solutions for the priest shortage is to open the door, to lower the bar, to how can we get more, warm bodies in, priest positions? And like, it's proposed as a solution to the problem, but, we've all encountered those priests who, have decided to be, or maybe kind of rush their discernment, or are lonely and not feeling like because they thought they couldn't do something else. So like a big part of the 8-year process, or like when you see like a really, really solid priest coming out the other end of the seminary process, there was like some serious discernment, like this is what they're being called to, and it gives them life. Yeah. And that life, like they give life to the parish. And so, again, so like if we think that the solution, or what some people are proposing as, well, if we just open up the priesthood to all of these other groups, or just kind of lower our standards or expectations for priests, having more bad priests is not going to solve the problem.
And I think we could say, and we've said it before in the podcast, but it's like, let's look at other Christian denominations that have done that. Yeah. And are they thriving more because they've done that? Other other denominations have opened the doors to married priests, women priests, all those kind of. Are they facing the same? And they are. They're facing, if not in worse numbers than us, in decline and everything else. So it's not the solution necessarily. It's and in fact, like you kind of suggested, I think young people are flocking to the real.
Yeah.
To the truth. There's so much world of fake out there. When they see a priest rushing through the mass, this obviously isn't important to them. So what they've talked about isn't true.
Well, it's like, if it's not worth your time, why am I here?
Exactly. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. But when they see a priest and then they're like, oh, there's something here. There's something here. What am I getting here? And they're attracted to the truth. They're attracted to that reverence. They're attracted to the awesomeness that is our faith and the 2,000 years that we have to back it up.
And the church was never kind of qualified on the basis of quantity.
Yeah.
That it's like that's right.
We started with 12.
And this study too really kind of confirms that, like, quality over quantity is kind of the emphasis here, and what we really need to focus on in encouraging expectations. And I think it was Benedict XVI that said, like, in the future, in the coming years, we can probably expect a smaller church, but hopefully a more faithful
Stronger
church.
Yeah.
Okay, well, hey, thanks for the discussion on that. I think what we can take from this is, number one, we have to be people who live our faith with integrity. We have to encourage young people to discern their vocation, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Right? Like, let's think about where God is calling us. God leads us to a place to fulfill the purpose he's put us here for, right? So we'll be happy with whatever our discernment is, but we have to discern. Yeah. We have to pray. The other thing I think that's important is, for anyone listening, are you contributing in the best way possible to the life of your parish? Like, are you using the gifts that God has given you to help your parish community, to take the load off your priest or the deacon or whatever it is, and help the community flourish? Everyone has a role to play in the church, right? That's why we're a big family. So I think that's something to consider. And then when everyone works together and we're faithful to the Lord, I think the Lord is still calling people to be priests. Lots of people are just ignoring that discernment, right?
I think
so. We have to foster places. We have to foster
Yes.
parishes that allow for that to happen.
Yeah, good holy men. We got to raise good holy men.
All right. So if you have anything to add to this conversation from home, you can drop us a line either on our social media pages or at askus@thecatholicbuzz.com and let us know. Maybe there's something that's working in your parish. Maybe there's something that's not working in your parish. Maybe there's really some great priests that have helped you in your faith journey that you can share with us as well. So that's all the time we have for today. So for Josh Sullivan and Matt Van Milligan, my name is Father Daniele. We'll see you next time on The Catholic Buzz.